They say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes the deepest cuts come from within your own family. On my 73rd birthday, a storm brewed that would force me to confront the unimaginable and prove just how much a mother can endure before she finally breaks. Today, July 6, 2025, I, Eleanor Vance, turned 73 years old. I woke at 6 a.m. as always, a habit forged over decades of opening my antique shop by 8. My late husband, Arthur, always preached discipline, but most of his pronouncements were just hot air. I rose from the bed I'd slept in alone for 10 years and gazed out. Frankfort, Kentucky, was stirring with me. Old Bert, the letter carrier, was already making his rounds. Mrs. Henderson was out with her Pomeranian, and the warm glow from the Jenkins bakery promised fresh pastries. For 50 years, I'd seen this same tableau, yet the faces constantly shifted. Bert's father once delivered the mail. Mrs. Henderson had a Persian cat, not a dog. The Jenkins parents ran the bakery, and I wasn't an elderly woman, but a vibrant young mother of 3, with a husband who swore he'd give me the world. My reflection in the window pane revealed the truth. Little remained of that girl. Gray hair I'd stopped dyeing 5 years ago, wrinkles I no longer bothered to conceal with makeup. Hands, gnarled and veined, bore the scars of years spent in the shop, hauling heavy boxes of antique clocks, fragile porcelain, and dusty canvases. The phone on my nightstand was silent. No surprise there. My children rarely remembered my birthday. Last year, Samantha sent a card 3 days late. Michael managed a Facebook message. And Benjamin? Benjamin called, but only to ask for money for a new gaming console. I slipped on my old, faded silk robe, padded into the kitchen, and set the kettle to boil. The fridge was, as usual, half empty. Why cook for one? I pulled out an egg, a slice of cheddar, and the last tomato. An omelet for a birthday breakfast. Why not? As I cooked, my mind drifted back to the past, to the day I met Arthur Vance at a local school dance. I was only 18, he 22, fresh out of the army, impossibly handsome in his uniform, with a confident grin and tales of far-flung places. I'd never left Frankfort and listened, captivated. 3 months later, we were married, and a year after that, Samantha was born. I remember holding her, so tiny, so fragile. Arthur was thrilled, especially when Michael arrived 2 years later. A son. A continuation of the family name. We lived in a small apartment above the antique shop Arthur had inherited. Money was tight, but we were young and full of dreams. Benjamin arrived when I was 25, an unplanned but cherished third child. By then, Arthur had started drinking. Not heavily, but steadily. The shop wasn't thriving as he'd hoped, and he drowned his frustrations in whiskey. I started working more, leaving the kids with my mother. When she fell ill, I was torn between my children, the shop, and her care. Arthur spent more and more time in bars, stumbling home, cursing. He never laid a hand on me, and for that, I can't blame him. But words, especially from someone you love, can cut deeper than any punch. I remember Samantha, at 12, asking why I didn't leave him. "Family comes first, honey," I'd replied then. But the truth was, I had no idea how I'd support 3 children alone, with no education, no marketable skills, no safety net. My mother had passed, leaving me only old photos and a worn Bible. My omelet burned as I reminisced. I turned off the stove, slid the charred remains onto a plate. A burnt breakfast on my birthday, a fitting symbol for my life. I always felt like I was just about to get things right, but at the last moment, everything would unravel. Samantha grew up fiercely independent, brilliant in school, always bringing home accolades. She was my spitting image, yet completely different on the inside. I never learned to stand up for myself, but she did, even as a little girl. At 18, she earned a scholarship to law school and left, rarely returning. Now, she's a top-tier attorney in New York City, married to an equally successful investment banker. They have 2 children, my grandchildren, whom I've only seen in carefully curated social media posts. Michael followed in his father's footsteps, not the drinking, but the lack of ambition. He graduated from community college, became an insurance claims adjuster, and married a sweet girl named Jessica. They have 3 kids, live 2 hours away, and call occasionally, usually for Christmas. Michael was always the quiet, unassuming child, and he remained so as an adult. Then there was Benjamin, my youngest, the most handsome of them all, with dimples and a dazzling smile. Arthur used to spoil him when sober. My little prince, he'd coo, tossing the giggling baby towards the ceiling, before retreating to the bar, leaving me with a crying infant, endless chores, and mounting bills. Benjamin grew up knowing he could get anything he wanted with a smile and a request, first from me, then from teachers, then from girls. He changed colleges like changing shirts, never finding his passion, and bounced between jobs just as often, always returning home when the money ran out. I finished my tea and glanced at the clock. Almost 8 a.m. Time to get ready for book club, my sole weekly indulgence. We gather at the library, a group of women my age, discussing books no one under 60 would touch. I climbed the stairs slowly, my knees aching. The arthritis was worsening, but I tried to ignore it. The doctor insisted on surgery, but who would care for me afterwards? Benjamin? I doubted it. Arthur died 10 years ago, a heart attack in the shop, amidst paint cans and dusty tools. I found him when I returned from lunch, lying on the floor, eyes fixed on the ceiling. After the funeral, I sold the shop. Enough to clear the debts and set aside a little for my old age. I dressed, admiring my reflection. A dark blue dress, the pearl brooch Arthur had given me for our 20th anniversary, a rare moment of generosity. My gray hair was pulled back into a neat bun. A touch of lipstick, a small concession to vanity. The phone rang, startling me. Benjamin, finally remembering his mother's birthday. Hello, Mrs. Vance. This is Linda from the book club. Just wanted to let you know, there's no meeting today. Margaret has the flu, and Evelyn's visiting her daughter. Oh, I managed, disappointment washing over me. Thank you for the heads up. Happy birthday, by the way. We remembered. It's just the cancellation. It's all right, Linda. Thanks for the birthday greeting. I hung up, looking at myself in the mirror again. An entire day stretched before me, with nothing to fill it. I could go to the park, feed the ducks. I could go to the supermarket. I could watch TV. My gaze fell on a framed photograph on the dresser, all of us on a picnic in the park. Samantha, around 12, with pigtails and a serious expression. Michael, 10, with a scraped knee and a gap-toothed grin. Benjamin, small, about 5, perched on my lap. And Arthur, sober, smiling, his hand resting on my shoulder. A rare snapshot of family bliss, captured by a passing stranger. I remembered that day, grilling hot dogs, the kids playing badminton, Arthur telling jokes that made us all laugh until we cried. This was before Samantha started shaming us, before Michael retreated, before Benjamin learned to manipulate. The phone rang again. This time, I let it ring. My cell phone. Hello, Mom? It's Benjamin. My heart fluttered, as it always did, at the sound of his voice. No matter what, he was still my little boy. Benjamin. Hello. Happy birthday, Mom. Sorry it's so early, but I've got a lot to do today. Thank you, darling. How are you? Great. Terrific, actually. Listen, I have some news. I'm coming to see you this weekend. There's something important we need to discuss. I recognize that tone. It used to mean failing grades, then getting fired from a job. Lately, it meant he needed money. Of course, darling. I'd love to see you. Great. And, I'm not coming alone. I'm bringing someone very special. A girlfriend. Benjamin changed girlfriends as often as he changed jobs. The woman of my life, Mom, he'd declare. But we'll talk about that when I get there. Gotta run. Love you. He hung up before I could reply. Typical Benjamin. Always in a hurry, always on the run. I slowly sank onto the edge of the bed. The woman of his life. The last time he'd used that phrase was about Vivian, the French waitress who dumped him after a month when she realized he was broke. Or about Zoe, the aspiring actress who used his apartment for rehearsals with her real boyfriend. Or about Danielle, who, never mind. I stood, determined, and headed for the closet. Since book club was cancelled, I could do something useful, like sorting through old clothes to donate. In the closet, amidst boxes of photos and old letters, I found a scrapbook of children's drawings. Benjamin's drawings, bright, messy strokes depicting home, family, sunshine. In one, I was holding his hand, drawn almost twice as tall as him, with a huge smile and hair like a crown. "My mom is the best," it declared in his childish scrawl. When did he stop thinking that? When did I stop being a hero in his eyes and become just an ATM? I remembered working overtime to pay for his soccer uniforms, denying myself new clothes to buy him expensive sneakers, staying up late to help with homework even when I was exhausted. And then the colleges. 1, 2, 3. "Mom, this isn't my thing. I want to try something else." And I'd agreed, paying the bills, believing he would find his calling one day. I remembered the night Arthur had yelled at me, accusing me of spoiling Benjamin too much. "You're making a slacker out of him," he'd roared, waving a bottle. And I'd replied, "I just want him to have the opportunities we didn't have." But how had that turned out? Samantha, who'd earned her own way through law school, barely spoke to me. Michael, who never asked for anything, only called on holidays. And Benjamin, on whom I'd lavished the most time, money, and love, took it all for granted. I closed the album and returned it to the closet. No point in wallowing in regret. What's done is done. The rest of the day passed in mundane chores, laundry, cleaning, cooking lunch, which I ate alone, watching the birds outside the window. In the evening, I watched an old movie on TV, then read the novel we were supposed to discuss at book club. The phone remained silent. Neither Samantha nor Michael remembered my birthday. Or perhaps they remembered, but were too caught up in their own lives to call. Before bed, I took a pill for my blood pressure, one for arthritis and another for insomnia. I looked at Arthur's picture on the nightstand. "Look what our life has become," I whispered to his smiling face. "You're gone, and I'm left alone in an empty house with children who barely remember me." Arthur, of course, didn't answer. He'd never been particularly talkative, even in life. I turned off the light and lay staring into the darkness. Benjamin would be here this weekend, with the woman of his life. I wondered what she was like, this new girl. I hoped he'd have better luck this time. I hoped she wouldn't break his heart like the others. And I hoped I wouldn't have to pick up the pieces again. I closed my eyes, feeling the pills begin to take effect, fogging my mind. Tomorrow would be a new day. Just like today. Just like yesterday. And just like all the days before that, since I'd been alone in this house full of memories. Years of sacrifice, years of work, years of caring for others. And what was left for me? Silence. Loneliness. And occasional calls from a son who needed something. But he was still my son. And I still loved him, no matter what. Because that's what mothers do, love their children unconditionally, even when it hurts. Saturday morning, October 25th, 2025, was surprisingly sunny for late October in Frankfurt. I was up earlier than usual. Sleep had long been an unreliable companion. I rose with the first light, preparing for the arrival of Benjamin and his mysterious companion. The whole house sparkled. I'd spent yesterday cleaning as if expecting royalty, not my own son, who'd happily lived amidst scattered socks and unwashed dishes for years. But I wanted everything perfect. Perhaps this new girl truly was special. Perhaps she would finally make my Benjamin happy and, dare I hope, responsible. I baked his favorite apple pie, roasted chicken with herbs, and made my mother's potato salad. The table was set with our best tablecloth, the one we used only on special occasions when Arthur was alive. The doorbell rang at precisely 2 p.m., unusual punctuality for Benjamin, who was typically at least an hour late. I smoothed my hair, straightened my dress, and went to open the door. On the doorstep stood my son, handsome as ever in a suit that clearly cost more than he could afford. Beside him was a tall, slender blonde with flawless makeup and cold blue eyes. Around her neck sparkled a diamond necklace that looked far too expensive for a casual visit to a future mother-in-law. "Mom," Benjamin enveloped me in a hug that felt a little contrived. "You look beautiful. I'd like you to meet Tiffany Albright." Tiffany, the love of my life. The girl offered a practiced smile, extending a perfectly manicured hand. Mrs. Vance, it's so nice to finally meet you. Benjamin has told me so much about you. Her voice was melodic, but something about it made me wary. Perhaps it was the faint note of condescension I'd learned to recognize over years of serving wealthy customers at the shop. Please, come in, I said, stepping aside. Lunch is almost ready. They entered, and I noticed Tiffany's eyes sweeping over my modest living room, the old couch, the worn rug, family photos in simple frames. A flicker of something akin to disappointment crossed her face. What a cozy space, she said, and I could almost physically feel the insincerity in her compliment. Thank you, I replied. Arthur and I bought it 45 years ago. Lots of memories. Arthur is Benjamin's father, she asked, though I was certain Benjamin had already briefed her on his family. Yes, my late husband. Oh, I'm sorry. Benjamin said it happened a long time ago. 10 years ago. I turned to my son. Benjamin, why don't you show Tiffany around the house while I finish lunch? He nodded, visibly relieved to escape a potentially awkward conversation. Sure, Mom. Come on, honey, I'll show you where I spent my childhood. I returned to the kitchen, listening to their footsteps and muffled voices upstairs. Something about this Tiffany bothered me. Perhaps it was the way she carried herself, as if granting me a favor by being here, or the way she looked at Benjamin, not with love, but with a calculating interest. 15 minutes later, they descended, and I invited them to the table. Tiffany sat with a perfectly straight back, as if she'd swallowed a ruler. Benjamin sat beside her, casting adoring, yet uncertain, glances her way. Everything looks delicious, Mrs. Vance, Tiffany said, taking a minuscule portion of salad. Mom's the best cook in the world. Benjamin exclaimed. You have to try her apple pie, it's really something. I follow a gluten-free diet, Tiffany replied with a faint smile. But I'm sure the pie is wonderful. I noticed Benjamin's shoulders sag a little. He'd always been sensitive to rejection, even minor ones. I decided to lighten the mood. How did you two meet? Benjamin brightened, eager to tell the story. It was like a movie, Mom. Remember I got that job at Sterling and Stone Advertising 3 months ago? Tiffany is the senior creative director there. She just walked into my office to get some paperwork, and I was clearing my desk, and I accidentally dropped a stack of documents, and she helped me pick them up, and our hands touched, and I thought this clumsy newcomer was charming as hell. Tiffany finished for him, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And then it turned out we had so much in common. Yes, it's just unbelievable. Benjamin looked at her adoringly. We both love Italian food, Woody Allen movies, and traveling. I suppressed the urge to remind my son that he'd never traveled further than a neighboring state, and that his knowledge of Italian food extended only to pizza and spaghetti bolognese. But I didn't. Lovers often adapt to each other's interests, and there's nothing wrong with that. What do you do at Sterling and Stone, Benjamin? I asked, though I knew he was in some junior position. Oh, I'm the assistant client services manager, he said, as if he were at least a vice president. But my boss, Mr. Thompson, hinted that I might get a promotion soon. Benjamin is a very promising employee, Tiffany confirmed, a flicker of sincerity in her voice for the first time. He certainly has potential. I'm glad to hear that. I truly was. Maybe this girl really was a good influence. And what do you do, Tiffany? Creative director sounds impressive. I'm responsible for developing advertising campaigns for our key clients. She straightened up even further, if that were possible. They're mostly luxury brands, high-end jewelry, designer fashion, luxury real estate. I have a master's degree in marketing from Columbia and a design degree from Parsons School of Design. Impressive, I said sincerely. And how old are you, if you don't mind me asking? 32. She replied with a smile that clearly said, and I look amazing for my age, don't I? I did a quick mental calculation. Benjamin was 28. The age difference was minor, but considering the disparity in career achievements. What did I care, though? If they were happy, nothing else mattered. And you're in a committed relationship? I asked, though it was obvious from their intertwined hands. Benjamin and Tiffany exchanged knowing glances, identical enigmatic smiles on their faces. Actually, Mom, Benjamin took Tiffany's hand, we have some news for you. We're engaged. Tiffany finished, extending her left hand, on which a large diamond glittered. I nearly choked on a piece of chicken. They'd only known each other for 3 months, and they were already engaged? That's wonderful. I managed, trying to sound sincere. Congratulations to both of you. Thank you, Mom. Benjamin was beaming. I knew you'd be happy. We're planning to get married in the spring. So soon. I couldn't hide my surprise. April 16th, Tiffany clarified. It's the perfect time for the wedding we're planning. Everything is almost organized. You're very quick, I said, serving myself more salad to keep my hands busy. When you know it's fate, why wait? Benjamin brought Tiffany's hand to his lips and kissed her fingers. She smiled at him with the same cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. And where will the wedding take place? I asked, anticipating an answer I wouldn't like. At the Grand Oaks Country Club, Tiffany replied with obvious pleasure. It's the most prestigious wedding venue in the area. They have a stunning ballroom overlooking the lake and gorgeous gardens for photo shoots. I knew this club, or rather, I'd heard of it. It was one of those places where people like me weren't even allowed on the doorstep. Membership cost tens of thousands of dollars a year, and even for members, renting event space was astronomical. Sounds expensive, I said cautiously. It's worth it, Tiffany stated. We want our day to be special. You have no idea, Mom, what a wedding it's going to be. Benjamin excitedly interjected. 300 guests, including several celebrity clients of Tiffany's. A live band. A 5-tiered cake by the best pastry chef in town. Fireworks over the lake as a grand finale. 300 guests? I couldn't hide my astonishment. Benjamin, you don't even know that many people. They're mostly colleagues, business associates, and Tiffany's friends, he shrugged, as if it didn't matter. Important connections for our future. And I thought weddings were for the nearest and dearest, I muttered. Times have changed, Mrs. Vance, Tiffany offered an indulgent smile. Modern weddings are also social events, an opportunity to make an impression and build connections. I remained silent, realizing any argument I made would be seen as old-fashioned and backward. What about your dress? I asked, trying to show interest in their plans. Tiffany's eyes lit up for the first time in the entire conversation. Oh, it's something special. It's going to be an exclusive design by Vera Wang, sewn especially for me. I'm flying to New York next week for my first fitting. Vera Wang. Even I, far removed from the world of high fashion, knew her dresses cost at least a few tens of thousands of dollars. What about you, Benjamin? I turned to my son. An exclusive design too? A Tom Ford tuxedo. He puffed out his chest with pride. Tiffany says it's the best choice for a groom with my looks. I nodded, trying not to think about the cost. Who was I to judge if they could afford it? And we ordered some amazing floral arrangements, Tiffany continued. Orchids and roses from all over the world, specially delivered for the day. And each guest will receive a personalized gift, an engraved silver box and a bottle of Dom Perignon champagne, Benjamin added. I stopped chewing and slowly put down my fork. Something wasn't adding up. Benjamin, who a month ago had asked me for a $500 loan to fix his car, was suddenly planning a wedding that would cost. Pardon my indiscretion, but how much will all this splendor cost you? I asked directly. Tiffany and Benjamin looked at each other again, but this time there was a conspiratorial tension in their gazes. About $300,000, Benjamin finally answered. But it's worth it, Mom. It's a once-in-a-lifetime day. I felt dizzy. $300,000. A sum neither Benjamin nor even the successful Tiffany could have lying around. Who's going to pay for this wedding? My voice sounded weaker than I would have liked. There was a pause. Benjamin cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze. Well, actually, Mom, we thought you were going to help us with this. I stared at him, not believing my ears. Me? Benjamin, I don't have that kind of money. But you have savings, he finally looked me in the eye. And the house is all paid off. You could take out a loan against the house. A home equity loan. I felt the blood drain from my face. Are you suggesting I risk the roof over my head for your extravagant wedding? It's not a risk, Mom, Benjamin said, as if explaining the obvious to a child. It's an investment in our future. After the wedding, I'll have connections that will help me advance my career. I'll be able to pay you back with interest. Benjamin, I tried to speak calmly. You've changed 5 jobs in the last 3 years. Do you really expect me to believe a promise like that? This time it's different. He took Tiffany's hand, as if drawing confidence from it. I have Tiffany to support me, and I've really found my calling in advertising. Tiffany nodded with the same condescending expression. Mrs. Vance, I understand your concern, but I assure you, Benjamin is on the right track. And this wedding is not just a celebration, but an important step in building our social network. Plus, Benjamin added in a different tone, this is what normal mothers do, Mom. They pay for their children's weddings. It's tradition. Tradition says the bride's parents pay for the wedding. I objected, though I knew I was grasping at straws. It's an outdated custom, Tiffany said. In today's world, it's paid for by whoever can. My parents died when I was a teenager, and I only have an aunt who barely makes ends meet. And my father left us no inheritance, Benjamin said. Just you, Mom. And I know you have plenty of money after selling the shop. I felt anger rising inside me. He spoke as if I were hiding some great wealth from him. Benjamin, I said slowly, trying to control myself, the money from the sale of the shop went to pay off your father's debts and to provide me with a minimum of comfort in my old age. I don't have the luxury of spending $300,000 on a one-day event. But it's my wedding, he exclaimed, and I could hear the familiar hysterical tones of his childhood in his voice. Don't you want your only son to be happy? I have 3 children, Benjamin, I reminded him. And I want all of you to be happy. But happiness isn't measured in the cost of a wedding. That's what you think, he leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. Because you've never cared about status and prestige. Look at the way you live, in this old house, with this old furniture, with no ambition. His words hurt more than he could have imagined. How many nights had I stayed up, worrying about paying the bills and still putting something aside for his education? How many times had I denied myself new clothes to buy him the latest sneakers or video game? Benjamin, my voice trembled. I've spent my life taking care of you and your brother and sister. I don't regret it. But now I need to think about myself. I'm 73 years old, have arthritis that's progressing, and high blood pressure. My savings are all I have in case I get seriously ill. We'll take care of you if something happens, Benjamin said quickly, but there was no certainty in his eyes. I looked at him point blank. You can barely take care of yourself, Benjamin. You live from paycheck to paycheck, borrowing money all the time. How are you going to take care of an elderly mother with medical problems? He opened his mouth to object, but Tiffany placed a hand on his shoulder, stopping him. Mrs. Vance, she said in her melodious voice, which now held an edge of ice. We understand your concern, but perhaps you don't realize how important this wedding is to Benjamin's future. Our future. It's not just a celebration, it's an investment. An investment? I repeated. An investment in what exactly? In connections. In reputation. In social capital, she said with the confidence of a business presentation. In the world we work in, image is everything, and this wedding will give us the image we need. Besides, Benjamin added, with a hint of accusation in his voice, you've always said you'd do anything you could for me. Isn't it in your power to help your son on the most important day of his life? I looked at both of them, the son I loved more than life, despite his flaws, and the cold, calculating woman he was about to marry. And suddenly, I realized they truly suited each other, both living in a world of illusion where external glitter was more important than internal content. I can't give you $300,000, I said firmly. That's all my savings and more. I could help with something more modest, maybe to pay for a photographer or flowers. A photographer or flowers? Benjamin jumped to his feet, his face red with anger. Are you suggesting we settle for something second-rate when you have the opportunity to give us the best? I don't have that opportunity, Benjamin. I stood up too, feeling my knees shake. And if you really wanted to marry Tiffany, and not just to show off, you'd realize that it's not the price of the wedding that matters, but your feelings for each other. Don't lecture me. He slammed his fist on the table, making the dishes bounce. You're just selfish. All your life you've only thought about yourself. I recoiled as if he'd hit me. How could he say that after all the sacrifices I'd made for him? Benjamin, Tiffany's voice cut through the tense silence. I think we'd better leave. Your mother has made her position clear. She stood and took his hand, as if to prevent further emotional outbursts. Yes, you're right. Benjamin took a deep breath, trying to calm down. There's nothing more for us to do here. Benjamin, please. I stepped toward him, holding out my hand. Let's discuss this calmly. Maybe we can find some solution that we can all agree on. What kind of solution, Mom? He looked at me bitterly. You've made it clear that my happiness means nothing to you. It doesn't. And you know it. I felt tears welling in my eyes. I just can't risk everything I have for one day. One day that will define the rest of our lives. Tiffany interjected. But, of course, you don't have to understand that, Mrs. Vance. They headed for the door, and I followed, feeling everything I'd tried to hold on to crumble. Benjamin, please don't go away like that. Let's talk. He stopped in the doorway and turned to me. There was a mixture of disappointment and determination in his eyes. You know what, Mom? You're going to regret this. We'll find a way to have our wedding without your help. And when you see the pictures in the magazines and realize what an opportunity you've missed, it'll be too late. Benjamin. I held out my hand to him, but he turned and walked toward the car where Tiffany was waiting. I stood on the doorstep, watching them drive away, feeling another part of my life crumble. Everything I'd done, all the sacrifices I'd made, and this is how it turned out. My son thought I was selfish for not wanting to risk my future for his showy wedding. The door closed behind them, and I was alone in the quiet of the house, where the table was still set for a celebratory dinner that had turned into a disaster. The apple pie, Benjamin's favorite, remained untouched. I spent the 3 days after Benjamin's visit in a daze. I slammed cupboard doors mechanically, cooked food I couldn't eat, reviewed old photo albums where my youngest son still smiled at me, without a shadow of reproach or calculation. The phone remained silent. Benjamin hadn't called, and I hesitated to call him first. What could I say? My decision hadn't changed, and I wasn't going to apologize for not risking my future for his whim. On the 4th day, the phone rang. I grabbed the receiver, hoping to hear my son's voice. Mom, it's me. I felt both relieved and tense at the same time. Benjamin sounded unusually calm, which was more alarming than his usual emotional outbursts. Benjamin, I'm glad you called. I wanted to, Mom, I'm not calling for small talk, he interrupted. I've discussed the situation with Tiffany, and we've decided to give you another chance. Another chance? As if I were the one who'd wronged them. Benjamin, I've already explained my position. I just don't have that kind of money. Listen to me carefully, Mother. I know you have savings. I know you can get a loan against the house. You just don't want to help your son. Benjamin, I know. Now you listen to me. His voice hardened. Remember when I gave up my internship in Boston to be there for you after your father died? How I was the only one to help you sort through his things, when Samantha and Michael didn't even show up. I remembered it differently. Benjamin did stay in town, but only because he hadn't been accepted for that internship. I'd seen the rejection letter he'd forgotten to put away. And he was reluctant to help, constantly complaining and making excuses. I remember, Benjamin. But do you remember when I took you to the doctor after your knee surgery 3 years ago? When your precious older kids didn't even call to check on you. That was an outright lie. Benjamin took me to the hospital once and disappeared for a week. Michael came every day to help around the house. Samantha couldn't come, but she called twice a day and paid for a nurse. Benjamin, you're exaggerating. I am exaggerating? His voice broke into a scream. I'm the only one of your children who's always been there for you. And now, when I need your help, just once in my life, you refuse me. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Benjamin, I'm grateful for everything you've done for me, but $300,000 isn't just help. It's all my savings. It's my security in my old age. And who will take care of you in your old age if not your children? He asked with icy logic. But if you refuse to help us now, why should we help you later? It was pure blackmail, and I felt anger boiling inside me. Are you threatening me, Benjamin? Are you saying you'll leave me in my old age if I don't pay for your wedding? I'm just pointing out the facts, Mom. Relationships are a two-way street. You don't help me, I don't help you. All's fair. I clutched the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. That's not what I taught you, Benjamin. I taught you to help others not because you expect something in return, but because it's the right thing to do. Save your sermons, Mother, he sneered, and I could almost see his lips curve contemptuously. The world has changed. Sentimentality is a luxury for those who can afford it. I can't believe you really think that, I whispered, feeling my eyes fill with tears. Believe it, Mom. And believe this. If you don't agree to help us with the money for the wedding, Tiffany and I are going to sue you. Sue? I was so shocked I couldn't say anything coherent. Yes, a lawsuit. We have witnesses who will testify that you promised to pay for my wedding when I was a teenager. That promise is enforceable. I never promised that, I exclaimed, finally finding my voice. It's word against word, Mom. And you know what? The court is more likely to believe a young couple building a life than an older woman who may have just forgotten her promise, especially when we have multiple witnesses. You're lying, Benjamin. I felt something inside me snap. You're willing to lie under oath to get the money? I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make sure Tiffany and I have the wedding we deserve, he answered without a shadow of remorse. Think about it, Mom. You have a week to change your mind before we file suit. He hung up, leaving me in the deafening silence of the kitchen. I slowly lowered myself into a chair, feeling my knees shake. My own son was threatening me with a lawsuit. My own son was willing to lie to get my money. The week passed in a blur. I hardly slept, constantly replaying the conversation with Benjamin, trying to figure out how we'd gotten to this point. Where had I gone wrong in raising him? What had I done wrong? On the 8th day after his call, the doorbell rang. On the doorstep stood a young man in a crisp suit with a folder in his hands. Mrs. Eleanor Vance, he asked in a formal tone. Yes, that's me. You have a summons. He handed me an envelope. The plaintiffs are Benjamin Vance and Tiffany Albright. You're charged with breach of oral contract and infliction of emotional distress. The hearing is set for 3 weeks from today in Frankfort Town Court. I took the envelope with trembling hands. The young man nodded and left, and I was left standing in the doorway, unable to move. He had really done it. My son had really sued me. I closed the door and walked slowly into the living room, sinking into a chair, still clutching the envelope. Emotional damage. Breach of oral contract. The words danced before my eyes, refusing to form meaningful phrases. I don't know how long I sat like that, staring at the same spot. When I finally roused myself, it was dark outside. I had to do something, but what? Hire a lawyer? I didn't have that kind of money. Defend myself? I didn't know anything about the law. And then it hit me. Samantha. My oldest daughter was an attorney, specializing in civil cases. We hadn't been close for years. She'd never forgiven me for not leaving Arthur when his drinking became unbearable. But right now, I needed her help. I glanced at the clock. It was almost 10 p.m., too late for a call, maybe, but I had no choice. With a racing heart, I dialed Samantha's number. After the 5th ring, she answered. Samantha Vance, her voice sounded professional and detached. Samantha, it's Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. A pause. Then, Mom? What's wrong? You never call this late. I need your help, honey. I took a deep breath. Benjamin is suing me. What? She sounded genuinely surprised. Benjamin sued you? For what? For refusing to pay for his wedding to Tiffany. Wait, what? What wedding? What Tiffany? Mom, start over. And I told her everything. About Benjamin's visit with his fiancée, about their demand to pay for a $300,000 wedding, about my refusal, about his threatening phone call, and finally, about the subpoena. Samantha listened in silence, occasionally interrupting me with short questions. When I finished, she was silent for a long time. Then she said one word, bastard. Samantha, don't say that about your brother, I said automatically, though I agreed with her in my heart. Mom, he's blackmailing you and filing a phony lawsuit. What else should I call him? She sighed. Look, I'll fly in tomorrow. I need to see that subpoena and talk to you in person. You're coming. I couldn't believe my ears. But what about your job? Your family? I'll take some time off and James will be fine with the kids for a couple days. This is important, Mom. I'm not going to let Benjamin terrorize you. I felt a lump come up in my throat. Thank you, darling. I don't know what I'd do without you. Don't thank me until I win the case, she said with the confidence of a professional. I'll fly in tomorrow night. Meet me at the airport at 7, okay? Of course, darling. I'll be there. And Mom. She paused. I'm glad you called. Me too, honey, I whispered. Me too. The next day, I met Samantha at the airport. She had changed since I'd last seen her at Christmas 2 years ago. She was more confident, more elegant. Her business suit fit flawlessly. Her short haircut emphasized her beautiful neckline. Samantha had always been the prettiest of my children, though she never made a big deal of it. Mom. She hugged me, and I inhaled her subtle, expensive perfume. You've lost weight, and you look tired. The last few weeks haven't been the easiest, I admitted with a forced smile. But now that you're here, I feel better. We drove home, and all the way, Samantha peppered me with questions. When exactly Benjamin had introduced Tiffany, what exactly they'd said about the wedding, how they'd phrased their demand for money. She jotted down my answers in a small notebook, sometimes frowning and shaking her head. At home, I showed her the court summons. Samantha scrutinized the document, making notes. They're seeking $300,000 in damages and court costs, she said, setting the papers aside. The grounds are breach of oral contract and infliction of emotional distress. They claim that you promised Benjamin you'd pay for his wedding when he was 16, and that promise was part of your family agreement. I never promised any such thing. I exclaimed. I may have said something like, someday you'll get married, and we'll have a beautiful wedding, but that was just motherly talk, not a promise to pay for an extravagant $300,000 celebration. I believe you, Mom. Samantha put her hand on mine. And the court will believe you too. Oral contracts must be specific and mutually beneficial to be enforceable. Vague promises don't fall under the definition. But Benjamin said he had witnesses. I was still worried. What if he found someone to lie under oath? Then we'll break down their testimony during cross-examination. Samantha spoke with such confidence that I was involuntarily relieved. But I need to know more about Benjamin's relationship with you and the money. Did he often ask you for money? I grinned unhappily. All the time. Ever since he graduated high school. First for college, then for an apartment, then for a car, then for car repairs. The list goes on and on. And you gave? Usually. I felt myself blush with embarrassment. Sometimes as a gift, sometimes as a loan that he promised to pay back, but never did. Do you have proof of these loans? Checks? Bank statements? Receipts? I've been thinking, there must be bank statements. I keep all my bank records. And I have a notebook where I write down how much I gave and what I gave it for. I know it's silly. It's not stupid, Mom. Samantha looked at me seriously. It could save you in court. Where's that notebook? I got up and walked to the secretary in the corner of the living room. I opened the top drawer and pulled out a shabby leather-bound notebook. Here. I held it out to Samantha. I started keeping it after your father died, when Benjamin started asking for money especially often. Samantha opened the notebook and flipped through the pages. Her eyebrows rose higher and higher. Mom, there are tens of thousands of dollars in here over the last 10 years. And that's just the loans, not counting the things you've given him for birthdays and holidays. I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of embarrassment and relief that someone was finally seeing how much I'd given to my youngest son. I know. I tried to help him get back on his feet, but every time something new happened. He lost his job, or his car broke down, or he needed to pay off credit card debt. Did he ever pay you back any of that money? Samantha asked, though her tone made it clear she already knew the answer. No, I shook my head. Always promising, but never giving it back. Samantha closed the notebook and put it on the table. Mom, I think we should countersue. A countersuit? I didn't know what she was talking about. For what? For unpaid loans. Samantha straightened up, a predatory glint in her eyes that I'd never seen before. Benjamin wants to play dirty? Good. We'll show him what that means. We'll demand all the money you've lent him over the years back, with interest. But he'll never be able to pay back that much. I objected, shocked by her suggestion. Exactly, Samantha smiled, and there was nothing warm about it. And when the judge sees how much you've already given Benjamin, and how much he owes you, his lawsuit will look not just baseless, but downright insolent. I looked at my daughter, not recognizing her. When did that little girl with pigtails, who cried over every wounded bird, turn into such a ruthless strategist? Do you really think we should do this? I asked uncertainly. It could ruin our family forever. Mom. Samantha took my hands. Benjamin already destroyed the family when he decided to sue you. He's declared war, and we have to defend ourselves, not out of revenge, but to protect you and your future. I took a deep breath. She was right, as bitter as it sounded. Okay, I said finally. Let's file a countersuit. Samantha nodded and opened her notebook again. I'll prepare all the documents. We'll need bank statements, witness statements. Perhaps Michael can corroborate some of the facts. And all the evidence we can gather. Michael. I was surprised. You want to drag Michael into this? Mom, this is a family matter. Michael needs to know what's going on and decide which side he's on. I never thought of it in those terms, whose side. But Samantha was right. Benjamin, with his lawsuit, forced all of us to choose sides. I'll call him tomorrow, I said tiredly. It's too late now. Good. Samantha stood up. Now you need to get some rest. We'll have a lot of work tomorrow. She leaned over and kissed me on the cheek, a gesture I hadn't seen from her in years. Good night, Mom. And don't worry. We won't let Benjamin win this battle. I watched her walk up the stairs, confident, strong, determined. My daughter, who had come to protect me despite years of estrangement. Maybe something good will come out of this whole nightmare, I thought. Maybe I could finally rebuild a relationship with at least one of my older children. The next day, Samantha and I began preparing for trial. She had drafted a counterclaim demanding that Benjamin pay back all the money I'd lent him over the past 10 years, an amount she estimated at over $120,000, not including interest. We'll file the countersuit tomorrow, Samantha said, closing her laptop. And we'll see how Benjamin reacts when he gets the summons. I'd never been to the courthouse. The grand, red brick structure, with its tall columns and wide staircase, was awe-inspiring and unsettling. Samantha's hand, supporting me under my elbow, was the only thing that gave me the strength to climb those steps. It's going to be okay, Mom, she said, as if reading my mind. We have a strong case and irrefutable evidence. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The last 3 weeks passed in feverish preparation. Samantha had worked like a woman possessed, gathering documents, interviewing witnesses, strategizing the defense. Michael, upon learning of what was happening, immediately took my side and provided an affidavit about how Benjamin had taken advantage of my kindness over the years. Inside, the courthouse looked even more impressive: marble floors, high ceilings, heavy wooden doors. We found the right room and took seats at the defendant's table. Samantha laid out neat folders of documents in front of her, numbered and marked with colorful stickers. Here they are, she whispered, nodding toward the entrance. I turned around and saw Benjamin and Tiffany entering the hall. My son looked tense, but determined. He was wearing an expensive suit that I was sure he couldn't afford. Tiffany, impeccable as always, walked beside him with her head held high. Their lawyer followed, with a smug smile on his face. Our eyes met, Benjamin's across the hall, and I felt my heart clench. There was not a shadow of remorse or doubt in his gaze, only cold determination. He quickly averted his eyes and sat down at the plaintiff's table, whispering something to Tiffany. The judge, an older man with gray hair and shrewd eyes, entered the room. Judge Maxwell, as the court clerk introduced him, had a reputation for fairness and strictness. All rise. Case number 827/25, Benjamin Vance and Tiffany Albright versus Eleanor Vance, before Judge Herbert Maxwell. We stood up, and I felt my knees shake. The judge took his seat and looked intently at both sides. Please be seated, he said, and his voice sounded calm and confident. We're here to hear a claim for breach of oral contract and emotional distress, as well as a counterclaim for unpaid loans. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone here that this is a family matter, and I hope that despite their differences, the parties will remain respectful of each other. Mr. Thompson, Benjamin's attorney, rose from his seat and walked to the center of the room. Your Honor, my clients, Benjamin Vance and Tiffany Albright, an engaged couple planning a wedding, are facing a treacherous breach of promise by Mr. Vance's mother, defendant Eleanor Vance. He paused dramatically, glancing around the auditorium where several spectators had already gathered, mostly reporters from the local newspaper and curious Frankfurt residents drawn to the unusual case. When Mr. Vance was 16 years old, his mother had promised him that she would pay for his wedding when the time came. It was not just a casual remark, but a serious promise made in the presence of witnesses. Mr. Vance had built his life plans around that promise, and now that he had finally found the love of his life and was preparing to marry, his mother was reneging on her promise, thereby breaking an oral contract and causing my clients significant emotional harm. I listened to this speech with growing indignation. Every word was a lie or a distortion of the truth. I had never made such a promise to Benjamin, and he knew it well. Samantha stood up for her opening statement. Your Honor, the plaintiff's allegations are not only baseless, they are an attempt at financial fraud. My client, Eleanor Vance, never made a promise to her son to pay for his wedding, much less a wedding costing $300,000, an amount that exceeds all of her savings. Samantha paused, giving this information a chance to penetrate the minds of those present. Moreover, Benjamin Vance has been financially supported by his mother for years, borrowing large sums of money from her which he has never repaid. As stated in the counterclaim, the total amount of unpaid loans amounted to over $120,000, exclusive of interest. A surprised whisper ran through the auditorium. I noticed some of the audience turn around to look at Benjamin, who now looked less certain. Benjamin was the first witness to be called. After taking the oath, he sat down, looking straight ahead, avoiding my gaze. Mr. Vance, Thompson began, tell the court about the day your mother promised to pay for your wedding. Benjamin cleared his throat and began to speak. It was on the day of my 16th birthday. We were sitting around a celebratory table, me, Mom, Dad, and a few family friends. We were discussing my future, and Mom said, "Don't worry about money, Benjamin. Dad and I will take care of your education, and when it's time to get married, I'll pay for your wedding." That's a promise. I clenched my fists under the table. It was an outright lie. The day of Benjamin's 16th birthday, Arthur had been so drunk he could barely speak, and we hadn't even had a celebratory dinner, just a quick cake after school until Dad came back from the bar. And who was present for that conversation? Thompson asked. Our neighbors, Gregory and Eleanor Finch. My high school friend, Derek Simmons. And of course, my father. During cross-examination, Samantha masterfully demolished Benjamin's version of events. Mr. Vance, you claimed that our mother promised to pay for your wedding on your 16th birthday in the presence of Gregory and Eleanor Finch, Derek Simmons, and your father. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct, Benjamin replied confidently. Interesting. Samantha walked over to the desk and picked up one of her folders. Because I have here a notarized statement from Derek Simmons in which he states that he did not attend your 16th birthday party because he was in the hospital that day with appendicitis. I also have medical records that confirm this fact. A whisper ran through the room. Benjamin turned slightly pale, but quickly pulled himself together. I must have made a mistake. It wasn't Derek, but another friend. Which friend? Samantha asked, not giving him time to think. I don't remember exactly. It was years ago. What about Gregory and Eleanor Finch? Are you sure they were present? Absolutely, Benjamin said firmly. Then how do you explain the fact that Gregory Finch died 2 years before your 16th birthday? Samantha pulled another document out of the folder. I have here Gregory Finch's death certificate and an obituary from the local paper. Benjamin's face now expressed obvious concern. He cast a quick glance at his lawyer, who looked equally anxious. Samantha continued her questioning. You claim to have always been close to our mother, especially after our father's death. How often did you visit her in the last year? Benjamin squirmed in his seat. I've been busy with work, but I've tried to visit as often as possible. What about last fall, when our mother had knee surgery? How many times did you visit her during rehab? I was very busy with work during that time. You mean none? Samantha raised an eyebrow. I have statements from the nurse who took care of Mom and our brother Michael, who came every day. Both claim you didn't show up once in the 2 weeks of her recovery. I did call. Benjamin objected. Weekly. Wants to ask for money for a new cell phone. Mr. Vance, Samantha pressed. Let's talk about money. How many times in the last 10 years have you borrowed money from our mother? Sometimes she helped me financially, Benjamin answered cautiously, like any mother helps her child. How many times exactly? And for how much in total? I didn't keep account. Fortunately, our mother did. Samantha pulled out the leather-covered notebook. According to her records, supported by bank statements, you've borrowed $122,640 from her over the last 10 years. Have you repaid a dime of that amount? Benjamin was silent, his face flushed with anger or shame. I couldn't tell. Mr. Vance, answer the question, the judge reminded him. No, Benjamin said at last. But I was going to. I just didn't have the opportunity yet. You have the opportunity to plan a wedding for $300,000. Samantha shook her head. Mr. Vance, do you know what our mother has been saving for all these years? Old age, I suppose, Benjamin muttered. For medical expenses. Samantha walked over to the judge and handed him a folder. Your Honor, these are my client's medical records. She has advanced arthritis that requires expensive treatment and heart problems that may require surgery in the near future. Her health insurance only covers a fraction of the costs. The money the plaintiff is demanding for his extravagant wedding is literally money to save his mother's life. The judge looked over the documents, and his face grew serious. He looked at Benjamin, and there was condemnation in his eyes. Mr. Vance, were you aware of your mother's medical problems? Yeah, I knew she had some health problems, Benjamin answered uncertainly, but I didn't think they were that serious. Because you never asked, Samantha remarked. I have no further questions for the witness, Your Honor. The next witness was Tiffany. She looked impeccable in her expensive suit and spoke confidently, confirming Benjamin's version of events. Under Samantha's cross-examination, however, she became confused about details, and it became obvious that her testimony had been carefully rehearsed, but did not stand up to critical scrutiny. Thompson then summoned Eleanor Finch, Gregory's widow, who had allegedly been present at that very conversation at Benjamin's birthday party. Mrs. Finch, Thompson began, were you present at Benjamin Vance's 16th birthday party? Yes, of course, she answered confidently. My late husband and I were good friends of the Vance family. And you heard Eleanor Vance promise to pay for her son's wedding? Absolutely I did, she said. When it's time to get married, I'll pay for your wedding. That's a promise. I remember that well because I thought how generous of her. Samantha quickly destroyed that testimony as well, revealing that Eleanor was an aunt to Tiffany, which undermined the credibility of her testimony. When it was the defendant's turn, Samantha called me. I sat down on the witness stand, feeling my heart pounding hard. Mrs. Vance, Samantha began in a formal tone, did you ever promise your son Benjamin that you would pay for his wedding? No, I answered firmly. I might have said something like, someday you'll get married, and we'll have a beautiful wedding. But that was just motherly talk, not a specific promise to pay for a $300,000 wedding. Tell the court about your financial situation. I took a deep breath. After my husband died 10 years ago, I sold our family antique shop. The proceeds were used to pay Arthur's debts and to build up a small emergency fund for me, for my old age. I live on a small pension and interest from those savings. Over the last 10 years, I've lent Benjamin a considerable amount of my money, hoping to help him get back on his feet. And exactly how much did you lend him? Over $120,000. I looked at Benjamin, who lowered his eyes. I always helped him whenever I could. Paid for his education, got him out of credit card debt a few times, gave him money for rent when he was evicted for non-payment. I never turned him down until he asked for an amount that would have effectively bankrupted me. Why is it so important for you to keep these savings? I have serious health problems, I said calmly, though my insides ached at the thought of discussing such personal matters in public. My arthritis is getting worse, and the doctors say I may need joint replacement surgery soon. I also have heart problems that may also require surgery. My health insurance doesn't cover many of the costs, and without savings, I won't be able to get the treatment I need. After me, Samantha called Michael, who flew in specifically for the trial. My middle son spoke confidently and sincerely, describing how Benjamin had taken advantage of my generosity for years, rarely showing up when help was needed, but always showing up when money was needed. Mom never said no to him, Michael said, looking at his brother with undisguised disappointment. She always said, he's still young, he's got everything ahead of him. Even when my sister and I saw that he was just using her. Then the neighbors spoke up, confirming that Benjamin rarely visited me, even when I was sick. The nurse who cared for me after my knee surgery told how Benjamin never showed up once during rehab, while Michael came daily. Finally, my physician, Dr. Harrison, confirmed the seriousness of my medical problems and the need for expensive treatment in the near future. Without adequate financial resources, he concluded, Mrs. Vance's quality of life would be greatly diminished, and in the worst-case scenario, her condition could become life-threatening. When all the witnesses had been interviewed, the judge announced that he was ready to rule. The hall fell silent. I looked at Benjamin, who now looked pale and uncertain. Tiffany sat next to him, her face impenetrable. Having considered all the evidence presented, Judge Maxwell began, I conclude that the claim of Benjamin Vance and Tiffany Albright is without merit. There is insufficient evidence of an oral contract between Eleanor Vance and her son regarding payment for the wedding. Moreover, the testimony of the plaintiffs and their witnesses contains substantial contradictions that undermine their credibility. A sigh of relief ran through the room. I felt Samantha squeeze my hand. As to the counterclaim, the judge continued, the court recognizes that Benjamin Vance does owe his mother a substantial amount of money borrowed and not repaid. The court orders him to pay Eleanor Vance $122,640, together with interest at the rate of 5% per annum from the date of each loan. I looked at Benjamin. His face contorted with horror as he realized the full extent of his defeat. Not only had he not gotten the money he needed, but now he was obligated to pay back everything he had borrowed from me over the years. Even worse, the whole town now knew that he had tried to sue his sick mother for the last of her savings for his extravagant wedding. Tiffany whispered something in his ear, her face expressing cold disappointment. Benjamin nodded slowly, without looking at her. The judgment is hereby pronounced, Judge Maxwell concluded with a bang of his gavel. This court is now adjourned. Samantha hugged me, whispering words of congratulations. I felt a strange mixture of relief and bitterness. I had won the case, but I had lost my son. Although, to be honest, I had lost him long before we were in that courtroom. As we left the courtroom, I watched Benjamin and Tiffany hurriedly leave the building through a side exit, avoiding the reporters who were already crowding the main entrance. My son's face was contorted with horror and humiliation, horror at the debt he was now obligated to pay, and humiliation at the fact that the whole town had learned of his attempt to rip off his own mother. When Judge Maxwell announced his decision, I felt a strange lightness, as if the weight that had been weighing on my shoulders for years had suddenly disappeared. The court dismissed Benjamin's suit in its entirety, and what's more, ordered him to pay me back all the money he had borrowed over the years, $122,640 plus interest. You won, Mom. Samantha hugged me in the courtroom. Justice had been served. I nodded, unable to say a word. Yes, it was a victory, but at what cost? My youngest son stood on the other side of the room, his face contorted with shock and humiliation. Our eyes met for a moment, and I saw something new in his gaze. Not anger, not resentment, but realization. A realization of what he had done. And perhaps shame. But the moment was short-lived. Tiffany, whose face expressed cold fury, grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the exit. They left the hall without a word. I didn't know then if I would ever see my son again. Samantha and Michael surrounded me with care, keeping me from sinking into sad thoughts. We walked out of the courthouse to the clicks of local reporters' cameras. The story of a mother whose own son tried to rob her of her last savings was too juicy for a small town. Don't pay attention, Samantha whispered as she led me to the car. Tomorrow, they'll find a new sensation. At home, we had a celebratory dinner organized by Jessica, Michael's wife. She came over with the kids while we were in court and cooked my favorite meals. My grandchildren, 10-year-old Ethan, 8-year-old Sophia, and 5-year-old Jackson, rushed toward me, hugging and gushing about their adventures. "Grandma, I won the school swimming competition," shouted Ethan. "And I drew a picture that hangs in the school hallway," Sophia kept up. "And I learned how to tie my shoelaces," proudly declared little Jackson, pointing to his shoes. I hugged them, laughing through my tears. How long it had been since they had been in my house. How much I had missed in their lives. At dinner, Michael raised his glass. To Mom, who was always our rock and never asked for anything in return. "We're sorry to you, Mom, but things will be different now." Everyone joined in the toast. Even the children raised their juice glasses, earnestly repeating to Grandma. Later, when the kids were asleep and we were sitting in the living room with cups of tea, Samantha said something she had apparently wanted to say for a long time. "Mom, I want to apologize for all these years of estrangement. I was so angry with you for not leaving Arthur when his drinking became unbearable. I thought it was weakness, but now I realize it was strength, to stay and continue to care for us, no matter what." I took her hand. "You don't have to apologize, dear. We each did what we thought was right, and I never held a grudge against you." "I should apologize too," Michael interjected. "I wasn't around as much as I should have been. I've always made excuses, work, kids, home. But the truth is, I just didn't want to see you grow old and Benjamin take advantage of your kindness." "You were both busy with your lives," I replied. "It's only natural. You have your families, your worries. But you're our family too," Samantha said firmly. And we were not to forget that. We talked late into the night, reminiscing about the past, sharing stories from our lives, making plans for the future. For the first time in years, I felt like my older children were really with me, not just physically, but emotionally. The next morning, over breakfast, Samantha announced her decision. "I've taken a month's vacation. I want to stay here with you, Mom. We have a lot of catching up to do." I was so touched I couldn't hold back my tears. "But your job? Your family? James will be fine with the kids," she smiled. "Besides, they'll be here for the weekend, and work isn't going anywhere. I can do some things remotely." "Michael has also decided to take a week off to spend time with me and Samantha," he said. "Jessica and the kids will stay too. The house will be full of life, just like the old days." I couldn't believe my happiness. After so many years of loneliness, my house was once again filled with voices, laughter, and warmth. A week after the trial, I received a letter from Benjamin. A short note, just a few lines. "Mom, I don't know if I'll ever be able to atone for what I've done, but I will try. Tiffany's gone. I think it's for the best. I'm starting fresh. Benjamin." No apology, no promise of a refund, but I hadn't expected it. For Benjamin to admit he was wrong was already a big step. "Give him time," Samantha said when I showed her the letter. "He has a lot to realize." I nodded, knowing she was right. No matter how much Benjamin hurt me, he was still my son, and I still loved him, no matter what. The local newspaper ran an article about our case under the headline, "Mother Wins Lawsuit Against Son Who Demanded Money for Wedding." The reporter, a young woman named Sarah Jenkins, asked to interview me. I agreed, hoping my story would help other seniors in a similar situation. "Mrs. Vance," she asked, "what advice would you give to other parents whose adult children require financial support?" I pondered. "I would say, love your children. Help them when you can, but not to your own detriment. You are entitled to your life, your plans, your security. And true love should never be one-sided." The article generated an unexpected response. People started calling and writing to me, some to share similar stories, others to express support. Linda from the book club suggested I become its leader. "You have life experience and wisdom worth sharing," she said, "and you've always loved books." So I became the leader of the book club at the local library. We met once a week, discussing not only books, but also life, sharing stories and experiences. Many of the participants were elderly, like me, but gradually younger people began to join us. It was amazing to see different generations finding common ground through literature. Samantha, watching my new endeavors, once said, "You know, Mom, You've always loved teaching. You could teach courses or workshops at a community center. The idea seemed absurd to me at first. Me? A simple woman with only a college degree? What could I teach others? You have a lot of business experience, Samantha reminded me. You and your father ran a shop for decades. You're also a great cook, a knitter. You know a lot of stories about our town. I thought about it, and I decided to take a chance. I applied to the community center to teach a home economics for modern living course. To my surprise, the application was accepted with enthusiasm. And even more surprising was the fact that 15 people came to the first class, from teenagers to young parents. In school, they teach us algebra and chemistry, said one young mother, but no one explains how to plan a budget, cook a simple meal, or fix leaky socks. That's how I became a teacher. I taught classes twice a week, sharing practical skills and worldly wisdom. Seeing my students' eyes light up when they learned a new skill was incredibly inspiring. I decided to spend some of the money from the trial, although Benjamin has only paid a small portion so far, on myself. All my life I had been saving, denying myself small pleasures. Now it was time to live for myself. My first folly was a trip to Europe, a lifelong dream. Samantha helped me organize a 2-week tour of Italy and France. I was afraid to go alone, so Michael suggested that his oldest son, my grandson Ethan, come with me. It would be good for him to spend time with his grandmother and see the world, he said. And you'll feel more comfortable with a companion. That trip was one of the most vivid experiences of my life. To see the Colosseum and the Eiffel Tower, to taste real Italian pasta and French croissants, to walk along narrow European streets. It all seemed like a dream. And to share these impressions with my grandson, to see the world through his eyes, was especially valuable. You know, Grandma, Ethan said as we sat in a small cafe in Rome, I used to think that old people were boring. But you're not like that at all. You're cool. I laughed. Thank you, darling. But remember, age doesn't make people boring or interesting. It's their attitude towards life. When I returned home, I found that my life had been completely transformed. My home was no longer a quiet fortress of solitude. There were now frequent visitors, children, grandchildren, and new friends from the book club and community center. Samantha, back in New York, called every day and visited once a month. Michael and his family now visited me every weekend. Even Benjamin began to slowly come back into my life. Short calls at first, then infrequent visits. He'd taken a new job, more modest than his previous one, but more stable. And he started paying off his debt, little by little, small amounts, but regularly. I don't expect you to ever pay it all back, I told him once. It's more important to me that you try to right the wrongs. He nodded, without looking me in the eye. I was a terrible son. You were a messed up person, I corrected him gently. And still my son, whom I love. It was the beginning of a long road to rebuilding our relationship, a journey we were both willing to take. We didn't talk about Tiffany. I learned from Samantha that she broke off the engagement the day after the trial, when it became clear there would be no money for a lavish wedding. A month later, she got engaged to the son of the owner of a local construction company, a young man with a much more stable financial situation than Benjamin's. Are you in pain? I cautiously asked my son when he first told me about the breakup. It did hurt, he admitted. But I realize now that she never loved me. She wanted status, a way of life that I couldn't give her. I was just a means to an end. I hugged him, feeling him relax in my arms for the first time in a long time. A year after the trial, my house was full of guests. We were celebrating my 74th birthday. All my children, their families, friends from book club, and the community center. Even Judge Maxwell stopped by to congratulate me. You've been an inspiration to many in our town, Mrs. Vance, he said, shaking my hand. Your story showed me that it's never too late to start living for yourself. I smiled, looking at the people around me. Samantha chatting animatedly with my students from the community center. Michael playing with the children in the garden. Benjamin sitting quietly in the corner, but still here, part of our family. Ethan showing pictures from our trip to his cousins. A life that seemed finished a year ago took on new meaning and new colors. I was no longer just a mother, a grandmother, a widow. I was Eleanor Vance, a teacher, a traveler, a book club leader, a woman who had finally learned to value herself the way she had always valued others. I stepped out onto the porch, savoring the warm evening air. The sunset was coloring the Frankfurt sky with pinks and golds, the same Frankfurt where I'd lived all my life, the town that knew me as Arthur's wife, mother of 3, antique shop owner. And now it knew me as a woman who had defended her right to her own life. Samantha followed me out and stood beside me, putting her hand on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about, Mom?" I smiled, looking out at the sunset. About how sometimes the end of one story becomes the beginning of another, much more interesting one. She hugged me tightly, and we stood like that, watching the day give way to night and the past to the future.